Alright guys, I hope you're having a great day. It seemed like a lot of you liked Grade Along in the last week, so I thought why not continue the series and do another one. As with the last time, you can download the footage pack of my shop. It's quite affordable. You get 12 clips so far and you can grade along in these sessions with me. So I just wanted to put that in there. As with the last time, you can download the Power Grade as well. It's in the Google Drives folder just down below. And you need to download both files. That was the thing that I learned from the last time. I hadn't exported these before. You need to download both files, make sure they're in the same folder. And then when you import the DPX file, as I'll show you in a second, you can just import the grade and grade along with me. So that's gonna make it super easy. And with all that said, today we're grading a drone clip, and it's one of my favorite clips that I've ever shot with my drone. And I did still include it in this footage pack, which it's my little baby, this shot, but it's a super difficult shot to grade. At least I had a lot of trouble with grading it in the beginning. And it's because the greens are a little bit weird in this shot, and it's also from a drone, and the exposure not shifting, but the light is shifting quite a lot because the camera is kind of just panning up like this. So I thought why not include it in the footage pack and let you guys have it and also grade along with me in this one, because I think it's a fun exercise and it just goes to show how much you can do with even a shot where the colors are rendered a little bit weird from the camera. So without more rambling going on, let's jump into Davinci Resolve and get started. All right, so if you have downloaded the footage pack, this is the clip that we're working with, the Bali Kampuhan Ridge Walk. If you haven't downloaded it, of course you can still follow along. If you have another drone shot or something else, all the techniques will apply as the same. But for this particular clip, you can see already that is a little bit washed out. This has already been converted to Rec.709, you'll see that in a second. But I have always found this clip a little bit more difficult to work with, and you'll see in a second why. It takes a little bit more fiddling, and hopefully this video won't be too long, but just jump into it. Now, if you wanna apply the exact same grade on Note Tree here as I have, you can download that from the Google Drive folder just down below. And what you do is you go into your gallery and into your stills or Power Grade folder and just right click and click import, and then you find the file. Now it's important that you choose the DPX file, but the DRX file, which will be in the Drive folder as well, you need to download both and make sure they're in the same folder, otherwise it won't work. But then just click import. I already have it, so I'm just gonna click cancel, and then it'll show up here. You can double click it or right click and click apply grade, and that will just apply the whole Note Tree here, and we can get started. Now, for those who don't download the grade or the note tree, the only thing I've done here is, of course, I've set up everything. These are a bunch of serial notes, and then we get to the parallel notes a little bit later, just like the last one, but the color space transforms are a little bit different from what I normally do. Not in the sense of converting to Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. We've done that before, so that's not new. But what's new is that the input color space is DJI Gamut. That makes sense. It's from a drone clip. It's from my Mavic 2 Pro. But what's a little bit different is that I use the input gamut from Canon LUT. And this was actually a suggestion from one of you guys in the comments on one of my previous videos, that the DJI LUT, and you can see that here, D-Log. For this footage, for this clip, it actually looks okay, but that's because the clip is a little bit washed out already. But usually it just washes out, or like makes it a little bit too dark, and it just doesn't look as good. So that's what I'm using instead. I'm using Canon LUT. You can use D-Log if you want that instead. For this clip, it works okay, but I'm gonna stick to the Canon LUT because that's what I'm used to with the drone clips now. And you might think, oh, that's different, or that's wrong for the input gamma here. In reality, it doesn't really matter. It matters that you get the result or the starting point that you need. And these are all just mappings and in some way subjective mappings. So I don't find that the D-Log mapping is the best in the world. So I'm using the Canon LUT instead. And for the other conversion here, we just have a Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate conversion from that, because that's the color space we're translating into in the beginning. Output it into Rec.709 and Gamma 2.4. For my timeline settings, my master settings is set to this. It's 4K. It's in 30 frames. The shot, a clip was shot in 30 frames as well, so it makes sense to keep it like that. You can also do it 24, and then you need to adjust the clip as well. For color management, we have the timeline color space set to Davinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate, and Rec.709 and Gamma 2.4 for output color space. I know I'm going a little bit fast, but these are all the boring technical factors that I know some of you will like to know. But now with that out of the way, let's get to grading. And the note tree looks a lot like it did last week. The only difference here is that we have a balance note. And this is not something I normally do. It's something that I see in other videos when I research and do stuff myself, but I thought we would include it in this video today because it actually makes sense for this particular clip. I'll show you in a second why. But let's start with the contrast. As always, we're moving backwards in the beginning with the color correction. So we start with contrast, then we'll balance, and then we do the exposure. And then from there on, we will move from primaries and move forward. So for the contrast, we'll just head into the custom curves here, and we'll just make a normal S-curve. So we'll just drag down the shadows, and I'll drag them down quite a lot in this clip because it needs to be unfolded a little bit more. As you can see now, we're stretching out the clip. If I hit Command D, you're turning it off. You can see how squeezed down together all the information is. Now we're stretching it out a lot more, so we have the darker and the brighter areas further apart, and that creates this very nice contrast in the image. Now, what I've never liked about this clip is that the greens just look weird. It looks too green, and I promise you it didn't look like this in real life. Like these greens out here, a little bit more like what it looked like in real life, I think, and like still a little bit weird, but a little bit more like normal greens, and these are it just doesn't look natural. So for the balance here, let's head to our vector scope instead. What we'll try to balance is this part in here. We'll try to balance that a little bit more into the middle. And how we do that is we go into our primaries color wheels and we head into the offset. But instead of adjusting the exposure, as we could do in a second, what we'll be doing here is we'll play around with the red, green, and blue channels to kind of mix this up and see if we can get a better or nicer looking look and balance out the image a little bit more. So I'll just try and start fiddling around with this a little bit. We can already see we're pushing some more red into the brighter areas here by pushing it up. And fiddle around with the green here and see what that does. Definitely want that to be lowered a little bit. And then seeing what the blue does. See if we drag it over so we actually have the bottom part of the colors here lying in the middle. I think that looks at least a little bit better. Still not perfect, but we get rid of some of that green and we introduce a little bit more warmth into it. And this was shot at sunrise, so that would make sense. We have a little bit more warmth in our image. So I'll leave it at that. It's not something I do often, as said, and we could go around it in different ways. I just wanted to play around with the balance node for once and also get better at it myself. So it's all learning progress, and that is why we do this. So let's head into the waveform again. What I kind of want to do here is want to turn down the lift a little bit. I don't want to clip the shadows, but I just want to turn it down to make it a little bit darker, maybe even a bit more. Something like this, around 3, looks pretty good. And then maybe turn up the gamma just a little bit. Just made it a little bit darker and just made the contrast stand out a little bit more and make it look a little less washed out. So for our color correction, this is pretty much what I would do. We went from this very washed out Rec.709 clip going through Davinci Wide Gamut into this, which already looks pretty good. I mean, for me, the greens are still off, but for something else, like for normal correction, this could be pretty decent. Let's go for the primaries here. So we're heading into the color grading where we get a lot more subjective. And for this, I think we'll again go for kind of a teal orange look, but we won't have it as strong because our shadows are not that dominant, I think, in this one. So let's just try and add 3 blue to green and maybe remove a red. So 0.03, 0.02, and negative 0.01 here. And now everything is very, very teal. And because we have actually added a little bit more luminance with the green and the blue, what I'm going to do here is going to go -1, just so we don't lose all of our darkest, deeper shadows here. And then for the gamma, I'm going to do the opposite. And today we're actually going to do the exact opposite of what we did in the lift. So like this. I think this already balances out the image a little bit more and also gives us a little bit more depth in some of the colors here. We could try and turn the gamma up a little bit, just like so. Now we're not really losing any of our contrast here. We're basically just applying some more colors, applying a little bit more teal, cooler tones in the shadow regions and some warmer tones in the highlight regions. I'm gonna leave it at that for the primaries. I think that is pretty good. We're still slowly building up to improving this image, but this is why I always struggled with this clip in particular, because it just takes some more fiddling around. Now I've graded this clip a lot of times, so I kind of know how to go about it, but I thought it was a good exercise for you guys. So in the curves, let's head into our hue versus hue. Now we don't have any skin tones that we have to take care of here, so I'm just gonna fiddle around with the greens and not really care about the skin tones. Obviously, if we were to work with greens like this in a shot where we had some skin tones as well, we had to be a lot more careful, but we can play around a little bit more now. So I'm gonna make a point in the yellows here just to help us navigate a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I want to make the yellows a little bit more orange, and I want to push the greens a little bit more towards the orange and warmer tones as well. So I'm going to introduce a little bit more warmth in the hues here. So I'm going to push the yellows up a little bit, and then I'm going to push the reds down a little bit just to kind of balance it out. Something like this. Already that looks a lot better. The greens are inheriting some of this as well. But I want to push the greens up just a little bit as well, so that we get these nicer, warmer greens. And just going from this to this, I think the shot already looks a lot better. Now it's still a little bit washed out in some areas and stuff, but just the colors in general, I could be pretty happy with just using the shot as it was now. Now, of course, we can still do some more. And I think because in the hues here, we added a little bit of yellow and we moved a little bit of red to keep the kind of saturation levels that we have, because we're moving away from the primary color here and pushing it a little bit more towards it. What we're going to do is we're going to make a point here again, but we are going to introduce a little bit more red saturation and remove a little bit of the saturation from the yellow here, and maybe push a little bit of the green in here as well. Something like this. It's not that noticeable, but it just makes a little bit of a difference, balancing the saturation of the colors a little bit more. And then for our luminance here, I'm just going to put a little bit more luminance into the yellows and remove it a little bit from the red and the green. Something like this. It's a little bit less vibrant now, but I like that. I think it looks a little bit better. I don't like those vibrant green colors. So now everything is a little bit more yellow oranges, which also fits that the sunset or sunrise, sorry, was coming from up here, which we will work with in a second when we get to the masking. The last thing I want to do is I want to go to this saturation and luminance. I kind of want to pick a point around here in the middle where I think it's a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to draw around it. I'm holding down my mouse key while I did that. And you need to select the qualifier if you haven't that already. That'll give you a point in this area. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a little bit more contrast between this part and the shadows. So I'm going to drag this up, which will also drag the highlights up. Not too much, just a little bit. And I'm going to drag the shadows down a little bit as well. And what this does is it just introduces more contrast. It also flattens out this area a little bit, but I think that's okay. Maybe it was a bit too much, so maybe we need to go just a tiny bit softer. And this is pretty good. So it just creates a bit more contrast again, but it uses the saturation to do so. I like the look that we have now. This is again subjective, so you can also just skip this step if you don't really want that. And then we head into the masking here. So for the masking, as always, we create a circular mask on the inside node here. We get to the parallel nodes in a second. Let's just do this first. So you could just have a serial node here in the beginning if you didn't make or copy the node tree. Let's make it in the middle and make it upwards, because this is kind of the focus point that we have of our shot here. Click Shift H to see what we've selected. I'm pretty happy with that selection. So let's head into our custom curves here again. I'm just going to introduce a little bit more contrast. Now, because I did that, we removed some brightness. So I'm just going to add 2 in the gamma. If I could do that like this, and remove 1 in the left. And that'll kind of just balance out a little bit of that reduction in brightness that we got, and just balance out our contrast a bit more. So now we have a bit more contrast. It's not as flat as the rest, and that just keeps our eyes and our attention a bit more in this area. Now, to get the outside node that we have here, you right click, you say add node, and you add an outside node. What an outside node does, and you can kind of see that depicted here already, is if you click Shift H, it selects everything that's not selected in the inside node, or the normal serial node. So it just selects everything else. And now I kind of want to make everything else a little bit darker, create kind of a vignette before we head on. So by doing this, we're just dragging down the gamma quite a bit. And that just introduces a lot more focus in the middle here. And for this shot, I feel like it kind of makes sense because we have these dives down, I don't know what it's called, ridges down here. So it kind of makes sense that it's a little bit more dark. And we still have the brightness here on the side of the ridge. So I think it looks pretty good when we do this, and it just creates a bit more contrast as well. We could do a lot more, but I think we will just keep it like this. One thing that we could try actually before we move on is just to introduce a little bit more teal. See how that looks. It does look all right, but I think we want to reduce the saturation a bit as well. So saturation to 40. I kind of like how that turns out. So let's actually keep that. That wasn't part of the plan originally, but let's just do it. And let's see if we were to add bit more red. No, we're gonna keep that. The inside node, we're not touching anything there, just introducing a little bit more coolness in the sides. It just kind of gives us a little bit more balance in the colors. All right, to add the highlights and the shadows, we just basically added parallel nodes here. So these are 2 parallel nodes. Let's move on to the highlights and do as we pretty much always do. The sun was coming from over here, somewhere out here in the horizon. So let's make our circular power window out here and drag this out, make the softening 100, something like this. Kind of want to just emulate the sun coming in. Now, it's already quite bright up here, a little bit too bright for my taste already. So we're going to take the qualifier again and click Shift H so we can see what we're doing. Then I'm just going to turn this down in the bright parts until this part up here is not selected anymore. Now it's not selected, and I'm going to soften it out a little bit just to make sure it's not cutting it too hard. Did that with a 5 and it still looks good. So what we can do now is we'll just take our custom curve here again and just slightly introduce a bit more here. I think that's all right already. It looks a little bit too much from the start, so let's just see. But I want to add a little bit more orange or yellow warmth here coming in. So actually it is a little bit too much. So let's just drag it down a notch again. Something like this. We're just introducing a little bit. Now I have a dehaze node here as well. And what we're going to do with that is to add that, you just add a serial node, and then you connect the blue output and the blue input here, the alpha key. And this should just select, it never does, should just select the same part. Now it does again, so you might need to disconnect this alpha key and connect it again to make sure that it's selecting the same part as we just had with the other one. And then I just want to go in and search for dehaze, I already did that. And then I want to add that in here. Now, first off, it looks a little bit bad, but what I like to do is to just go -0.1, and that just creates, like, it blends out some of that color that we just added, so it's not as strong, and it just kind of gives a little bit more of a hazy feeling. I like how that looks. Again, that's completely subjective. You don't have to do that. Moving on to the shadows. This is our rectangular window. I don't know why I always use a rectangular window for the shadows and circular for the other parts. Got no explanation for you for that. It's just what I do, but I always done that. So no particular reason. You could use a circular mask as well if you wanted. Making the window there, and then we're just going to drag down the shadows quite a bit here. And I'm going to go a little bit extreme on this shot and then pull the blacks up a little bit, because I kind of like to just really emphasize this. So we have brighter areas over here, dark areas here, and really getting that feeling of the sunrise coming in and hitting the ridge here. I am pretty happy with how this turns out. I think in some ways it's a little bit too purple or magenta up here. We could always fix that, but for the exercise that we're doing today in this tutorial, I think it's pretty good. We could do a bunch of stuff to fiddle around with this and make it even better. But again, I think this is pretty good. So let's just review quickly what we did. This is without the masking that we just did. This is with the masking. That makes a big difference in just controlling the light and making sure everything looks great. I think this is pretty good. So let's turn that off again and see what we did with our colors here. So this was our color grade. In this case, in the last video last week, it didn't make the biggest difference. In this week, it makes a huge difference, as you can see. So we went from these really weird green colors, and I think it's really evident how weird the colors were now, to this look that it's a different style, different look, certainly, but I think it looks so much better. Might be a little bit too bright in some parts with the saturation luminance that we did, but I like the look a lot more than what we had before. Turn that off and just see quickly what we did with our color correction in the beginning. This was the washed out look that we came from in the beginning, and this is what we got when we added our contrast, our balance, and our exposure. And if we were to go the other way around, just turn everything off. This was our lock clip that we had in the beginning before we did anything. This is our Rec.709 conversion. This is then with our color correction. Looks a lot better already. Our color grade. And then the last step of our color grading, our masking here. So a pretty dramatic difference from this clip. And this is why I love this clip so much. Not only is it quite cool clip in itself, but just look at how cool it looks, how it's panning down. I'm really proud of this clip. And the grade here, I think, looks great as well. It's still a little bit washed out in the background, but that's a really difficult thing for the drone to actually capture. So I think we did a pretty good job with this grade in itself. And now, obviously, if you pan down this much, you will see that if we turn everything off, we did have a little bit of information in the clouds or in the sky here, but that wasn't the main focus of this video. So we could do something about this so it's not as whited out. But I like the first part of the scene here until around here. And then I don't like this part as much. So that's why we didn't focus on that today. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed grading along. If you picked up the footage package as well, I hope you enjoyed grading this clip with me. It was a bit too fast. Go back, play it again, or even play it at 0.75% or like playback speed. That might help you a little bit as well. And besides that, I just hope you enjoy these videos. I enjoy making them. And until the next time, take care.